In today's video, I'm going to be talking about one of my very favorite characters from The Lion King, Timon. Now, if you're not familiar with Timon or his backstory, let me tell you some about him. Now, Timon, of course, appears in the very famous and my very favorite movie of all time, The Lion King. Now, before Simba's story begins, Timon's story actually begins, and we finally get to know his true backstory in The Lion King 1.5. Which, let me start off by telling you some about that. So, in The Lion King 1.5, Timon tells the viewers and Pumbaa about his past, his backstory. And in his backstory, he reveals that he was very different from his meerkat colony, which all they wanted to do was dig tunnels. And Timon was not like the rest of them. He wanted to be outside and live a carefree life. And he's tried several times to fit in, apparently, and nothing has worked. And when his mother comes up with an idea of how he could fit in, that doesn't go well because he ends up leading the hyenas, the 3 hyenas that later chased Simba and Nala when they were cubs, ended up finding Timon's colony, and it almost cost Timon's uncle his life. But thankfully everything turned out all right for him. He survived it. And yeah, things just didn't go well for Timon at all. So Timon eventually decided to leave to find his place, and he bumps into Rafiki, which, oddly enough, Rafiki's actually the one that told Timon about Hakuna Matata. So it's actually really interesting that Rafiki is the one that came from. So yeah. Anyway, so Timon sees Pride Rock and decides to go to that. On his way to Pride Rock, that's when he meets Pumbaa. And they travel to Pride Rock, and the next day, I think it's the next day, is the presentation of Simba. And oddly enough, Pumbaa sees Simba and is like, what's that thing that monkey's holding up? And Timon even says that it's not important. And, knowing how close they're going to be to Simba, I'm like, if you only knew that at least at that time, that's going to be your adopted son. But anyway, so Timon and Pumbaa stay at Pride Rock, or in the Pride Lands, for a while, and they eventually decide to move at that scene when Simba sings, "I just can't wait to be king." So eventually they move across the Pride Lands, and they get caught up in the wildebeest stampede that eventually caused Mufasa's death, other than Scar, of course, but anyway. So they go off the edge of a waterfall, survive that, and wash up near this oasis, which is where they lived, when they found Simba. So Timon and Pumbaa live there for a while, and they eventually, of course, come across Simba. They raise him, and there's even some moments in 1.5 that we didn't see in the first movie about Simba, being raised by Timon and Pumbaa, them taking care of him, and, that kind of thing. And then they show Simba when he's a teenager. They do show a little bit of him as a teenager in the first movie, but in this one we actually truly see him as a teenager in Lion King 1.5. So anyway, Simba grows, and eventually Nala, of course, comes, and it's actually revealed that Timon and Pumbaa tried to break them up. And then once Timon and Pumbaa see that Simba and Nala had a fight, Timon's happy about this, just because, he wanted their trio back. And of course, Simba goes back to the Pride Lands, and Pumbaa wants to go help Simba, but at first, Timon doesn't. But eventually, Timon gets lonely, and Rafiki shows up, and Timon realizes that he needs to go help Simba. So Timon and Pumbaa help out Simba, and there's this one part after Simba has Timon dress up in a hula outfit and distract the hyenas. Timon comes across his mother and uncle, and they help him get the hyenas away from Simba, which I kind of don't really know where this plays out in the first Lion King movie. I guess it's just a part we didn't see, I guess. But anyway, so Timon and Pumbaa and Timon's mother and uncle try to get the hyenas away from Simba, and the plan doesn't go too well, and Timon ends up risking his own life to save Pumbaa, his mother, and his uncle. So they are able to get the hyenas away from themselves as well. And after that, Simba takes his place as king, and Timon takes his family back to the oasis, and there's even a part where Simba's there with him. And I've always assumed that the oasis is probably where the lions stayed until the Pride Lands flourished again, and Simba probably made it very clear to them that they couldn't eat Timon or Pumbaa or any of Timon's relatives. At least that's what I'm guessing, but as of now that I know of, it's never been revealed where the lions stayed while the Pride Lands flourished. I mean, I'm pretty sure they didn't stay there, because Sarabi even says that they have to leave, so yeah. I doubt they stayed there. And the only place I can think of that they probably stayed at was the oasis, but anyway. So, yeah, that's Timon's backstory, and of course, eventually, according to the Lion Guard, Timon and Pumbaa decided to move in the Pride Lands with Simba. And of course, the Lion King 2 also reveals this too, because Timon and Pumbaa are in the oasis there with Simba in the Pride Lands. So I'm guessing once the Pride Lands flourished again and Simba and Nala and the others went back to the Pride Lands, I'm guessing, since Timon and Pumbaa were so close to Simba, maybe they felt like their place was really, with him. And they did help, eventually watch Kiara when she came along. But anyway, so yeah, that's Timon's backstory, and in The Lion King 2, like I said, it was shown that Timon and Pumbaa looked after Kiara, like Zazu looked after Simba. So Kiara was kind of, Timon and Pumbaa were kind of like to Kiara what Zazu was to Simba. And she, just like Simba, was able to get away from her babysitter, or in Kiara's case, babysitters. But also, Timon and Pumbaa also came to adopt a honey badger, who ended up becoming the best friend of Simba's son, Kion. And yeah, so Timon and Pumbaa, they've been pretty busy, I'm sure. Taking care of Simba down, through that time when he lived with them, and then taking care of Kion's best friend, and yeah. Oh, and also looking after Kiara. Oh boy. But anyway, so yeah, that's really all the present stuff I could say, or more recent stuff I could say about Timon and Pumbaa. But there's also some more information I can share, which has been revealed in Timon and Pumbaa's series. That's something how Timon and Pumbaa have both a show and a movie. It seems like the most popular side characters end up getting both at some point. And I think that's really cool. But anyway, so now I mentioned Timon's backstory, but it's actually interesting because their series actually revealed another backstory, which was told by Rafiki to Zazu, and then also Simba. But, in Lion King 1.5, that story was told by Timon, and of course he ought to know what his own backstory is. But oddly enough, the backstory that Rafiki told Zazu is nothing like the backstory that Timon himself said, talked about, which the backstory that Rafiki mentioned was that Timon lived in this really big colony, and there was a king in this colony, and Timon was a guard in this colony, and he was actually in love with the king's daughter. And one night when he went to prepare himself for a date with her, she ended up getting captured, and everyone blamed him for her getting captured, and then that's how he became an outcast, and then he met Pumbaa. And yeah, even how he met Pumbaa was different than what it was revealed to be in 1.5. I feel like 1.5 is what really happened, but if I'm also not mistaken, there's also another backstory of how Timon and Pumbaa met, which, if I'm not mistaken, is told by Pumbaa to Simba. And this, I think, was when Simba lived with them. Now, well, The Lion King 1.5, I feel like is more Timon's movie than Pumbaa's. So I guess that's kind of how, I guess that was just Pumbaa's point of view on the story. Since, again, Lion King 1.5 was more Timon's movie than Pumbaa's. In fact, we don't even really get any backstory on Pumbaa. There's still some things unknown about him for some reason, but anyway. So, in their show, Rafiki tells Zazu that, and eventually Timon realizes that the princess is alive. He rescues her and takes her back to the kingdom, and he is offered to marry her, but, he has to choose between marry her and not be an outcast anymore, or, be with Pumbaa, his new best friend. And of course, Timon chooses Pumbaa, and the rest is supposed to be history, but that's apparently not what really happened. I mean, because Timon himself, Timon ought to know what his own backstory is, so I really don't know why Rafiki said it like that. I don't know. I kind of hope they clear that up at some point. I've heard that some of the plot holes in The Lion King are being filled, and I hope they eventually fill that one here pretty soon, because that is confusing. Now, something else that I also find pretty interesting in Timon and Pumbaa series, not only was it revealed in that, backstory, or so-called backstory of Timon's, but apparently that princess was not Timon's only love interest, because there's an episode where, for some reason, Timon falls for this girl meerkat that is into movie stars, and he tries to become a movie star to impress her. And I'm like, aren't you already a movie star? I mean, you're in probably the biggest movie ever, or the biggest Disney movie ever, other than Frozen. But maybe that was before he met Simba, because the series really jumbled up. I mean, there's some episodes that have Zazu in it. In fact, I think there's a couple that actually are about Zazu. And yeah, there's a couple when Timon and Pumbaa live in the jungle and Simba's full grown, but most of them don't show Simba full grown, or Simba at all. So it's really interesting to know when these episodes actually took place. And it'd be interesting to know when this specific episode where Timon falls for this meerkat girl, when that took place. If that was before they found Simba or what. It might have been, but anyway. So Timon tries to impress her, and eventually he does, and he even wants the girl to kiss him, or kiss her. And I'm like, what is this, Little Mermaid? Kiss the girl? What is this? But anyway, so he does impress her, but apparently nothing comes of it. But it's actually interesting because there's actually another story I found of The Lion King where Timon falls for this other meerkat girl, and I think Pumbaa even teases him about it, I think. But I gotta admit, Timon is one of the cartoon characters I know of where it's kind of strange for them to fall in love. Although, I mean, Timon's not the strangest. I can think of some that's even stranger. But, you know, he's one of them. But anyway, so yeah, there's, you know, other things I could say about Timon, you know, due to their series, but I think I might actually save some of that because I might review some of those episodes. Because, you know, before Disney Plus, these episodes were really hard to find. In fact, I'm so glad that Disney Plus has all the episodes on it. Because I had actually wanted to see those episodes and had no way really of seeing them until Disney Plus came along, and eventually I was able to see them. So yeah, I might do a review about those at some point. And you know, it might actually also be really interesting to see another series or another movie of Timon and Pumbaa. I feel like, you know, I've heard that there's going to be, you know, more stuff with The Lion King at some point. That they plan on, you know, doing more with The Lion King. And I really feel like Timon and Pumbaa, you know, there's still plenty more adventures that they could, you know, have. And it really might be, you know, pretty interesting for maybe them to have, like, maybe an adventure with Nala or something. You know, after all, they didn't really like, or at least Timon didn't like, when Simba fell in love with Nala. So maybe they could show something that takes place after Simba becomes king, and after him and Nala get married, and maybe Timon still doesn't like Nala at first, and maybe he starts to, you know, befriend her and think that, you know, she's okay. That would be interesting, you know, see something like that. But anyway, it's actually interesting because in Timon and Pumbaa's show, Timon reveals to Pumbaa that he actually had a friend before him, which was this meerkat named Fred, and I'll get more into him in just a minute. But in 1.5, he says to Pumbaa that he's the only real friend he ever had, which I'm guessing he realized that Fred was never really a true friend to him, I guess. At least not like Pumbaa, I guess. But anyway, so about Fred, he's this meerkat that doesn't take anything seriously. He's a jokester, but he takes his jokes way too far. And I forget what the episode's called that he's in, but he's only in Timon and Pumbaa's old series. And in the first episode he's in, again, I forget what it's called, but Timon tells Pumbaa that an old friend of his was coming, and Timon mentions to Pumbaa that he doesn't want him to be left out, but come to find out, Timon's the one that ends up getting left out, and Fred wants to play a trick on Pumbaa, and Pumbaa's like, absolutely not, because the trick was horrible. And it's actually funny because Fred turns right back around and has Timon pull the same prank on Pumbaa that he was going to have Pumbaa pull on Timon, which was really messed up. But anyway, they get Fred back for tricking them, and yeah, they end up even leaving him in this hole for a while, but he does eventually get out because he's in a few other episodes. In fact, it's really funny because, as in the strange kind of funny, because in one of the episodes he even pretends to be Timon's mother, and then it's revealed that it's him, which, I don't know, I mean, the way he looked in that episode looked absolutely nothing like Timon's mom actually does, so I don't know how Timon fell for that. But I really don't think that Fred is bad. I don't know. I don't exactly know. In fact, I might even do a review on him, a character review on him at some point. I might. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this character review of Timon, and stay tuned for more. Bye.